Welcome, welcome to this. Let's do my battery pack. Welcome, welcome,
Welcome.
welcome, welcome to the month of May, and a new theme, which is what is it? The power of the inherent you. So I want you to imagine that you have a little velvet bag, and in that bag you put in the most sacred words that remember and realign yourself to your truth. Can you imagine having such a bag? And what I would ask is that, okay, this is very serious, okay? Velvet bag, sacred words, okay, follow me. One of the key words that I feel universally should be in everyone's little sacred bag of remembrance. Hold, please. I'll let you know what that is in just shortly. I was born on a dark and stormy night in a little town called Beaumont, Texas. Am I good? We'll soon know. Guess which word I'm going to ask you to put in your velvet bag. Love is good, but it's not the one I'm looking for. What's the theme of the month? The power of the inherent you. So the word that I want you to become really associated with is the word inherent. I feel that that's a word that needs to be in everyone's sacred bag of tools, of spiritual reminders. Because what does inherent mean? Our natural state, something undeniable, right? An inherent characteristic of us is the fact that we talk about spiritually that we are a part of the divine. So a part of our inherent nature is divinity. We talk about being in the flow and connected to that which is power. So a part of our inherent nature is power, right? Wouldn't you be outraged if you saw a precious animal being chained and locked up and being denied its inherent nature? Don't we get outraged by that? When we see that level of abuse done to a really beautiful, magnificent animal, that its inherent nature is being denied. Where is the outrage within ourselves about the denial of our inherent nature? Where is the advocacy for having each of us remember the truth of who we are? That's what inherent means, and that's why it's so important that we continue to wake up. Whether you wake up exponentially and with celestial speed up, or whether you wake up marginally, just as long as you continue to wake up to the idea of your inherent nature. That's what Spiritual Living Center is about. That's why this council is born, and that's why we are here to speak to you today. And so the topic is about the true order of things, and the true order of things is about our inherent nature, right?
Absolutely.
Magnificent Reverend Cynthia James. Welcome her back. Am I good now here?
I think you have to.
No, I'm not good.
Okay, good morning.
I could have worn my earrings now.
You could have worn,
yeah.
I know.
Okay.
It's
a thing.
So I was really grateful that we had a chance to talk about this. Pathway of Roses is one of my favorite books. And I've been on a circuitous route to awakening, because where I came from was challenging, and nobody understood the principles that we are teaching here. And I found myself at one point in a marriage, and it was interesting because I grew up poor, and we were on welfare, and we were standing in food lines and all this, and my whole family was like, basically, this is your destiny, this is how you're going to live. But there was something in me that was like, no, this is not my destiny. I'm going to travel around the world, and I'm going to live in beautiful places, and my children are going to be educated. And I had all this energy, and everybody thought I was a little crazy, right? So cut to, I'm living in Malibu, and I'm living with a wealthy man who has fame, and we're traveling, and we're doing all of these things, and I cannot figure out how come I'm not happy. right? My kids are in the best schools. You know, I have great clothes and I'm doing all this stuff and people recognize me and there's all this, but I'm not happy. And I keep trying to find a way to get it. I keep trying to find a way to make this okay. And even though I was brought up in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, right? You know, I mean, it was like this isn't working. Where's God in the mix? How come, you know, joy isn't like flooding through everything? In fact, chaos was the norm. And so one of the things that was interesting for me was that, you know, at the time I was going to Agape in Los Angeles, and I kept saying, well, I'll pray better, and I'll meditate better, and then it's going to drop in, right? But what I learned is that those material things were beautiful. And I think part of our inherent nature is to be wealthy, is to be abundant, is to be in a space of flow. But it's not the thing. And so I started to change. I said, okay, God, make me the most spiritual, loving, connected wife I can be. That was the good news. The interesting news is that it blew it up. And then I had to reinvent myself to live outside of this material space and find out who I was in the mix.
And so Christian Larson talks about the material, and the next one he talks about is the psychical, and then the spiritual. And which of those three do you think is the aim, or the one that is most aligned with our inherent nature? The spiritual, right? The psychical, he terms around emotion and trying to keep emotions at bay. Have you ever been around highly emotional people? You ever tried to manage highly emotional people? And so, Reverend Cynthia, you're talking about experiencing true material abundance, fame, all of the things that come with that, and yet still there was something missing, right?
Yeah, totally. And I couldn't buy it. There wasn't enough to fill the void.
And so those on a material path, just a strict material path, then we realize that you can never fully feed that. And then the cyclical part about the emotions means that the emotions then can be carried and influenced by a changing trend or something happening within our country or within our family dynamic. And all of a sudden, this thing called peace is gone because of an event. When peace is what? Inherent. But if we feel as though we're operating from just this cyclical realm that tells us my emotions and the way that I feel is dependent upon what's happening out there, then we become a prisoner to what? What's out there. So I was sharing with Cynthia that as a child, that was my world. It wasn't the material world. It was a cyclical world where I was trying to manage the widespread emotions of a mom who I often talk about being a rageaholic. So have you ever tried to manage a rageaholic? And that's what managing emotion is. What can I do? So I would come home from elementary school and I would clean. I'd clean the house. I would try to prepare dinner. I would use my lawnmower money to buy Mars bars. Do you ever remember Mars bars? Because that was my mother's favorite candy bar. And then I would put the candy bar in the freezer because that's the way she liked it. And then I would cut it into slices and I would have it on a little plate when she got home from work in order to try to manage what might be an outburst for whoever knows for what reason. And we might look upon that and go, oh my God, how horrible. But we also do that when we are at the mercy of outside circumstance. So if money seems to be lacking, or if we feel betrayal, or we feel as though we're being taken advantage of, or something's happening outside of us, where does the peace go, actually? Because the peace is inherent. The joy is inherent. The power is inherent. It doesn't go anywhere, but what are we doing with it? We are giving it over to those outside entities. And so to live in that world means that there is actually no security over our emotions, just as there's no security over the material, right? And then he says the third realm then is the spiritual.
Right. And, in the church that I grew up in, it was still outside this spiritual thing. There was, some being up there that was giving you points. And and when you didn't do it right, then you were going to be punished on some level, which never made sense to me as a kid. So I was thrilled when I found religious science, and I found that I was in charge of my thinking, and I was in charge of my life by the decisions that I made. And so the journey of spirituality was extraordinary for me. And I want to tell you, there's no arrival. You are not going to get there and boom, it's over, right? So I'm a minister, and I'm in Denver, and I'm an associate minister, and I everything feels like it's in the flow, and I watch my energy just keep tanking, and so I go to the doctor, and I've got this adrenal issue, and so I talk to the senior minister, and I go on sabbatical, and this is really interesting because this was such an awakening for me around spirituality, because 3 months to do nothing except to be with God, to pray, to meditate, to be in that energetic. And so I'm sitting in my sunroom. We live in the mountains of Colorado, and it's incredible. And there's trees everywhere, and we have a sunroom, and this beautiful tree, and there's birds, and I'm looking out there, and I'm going to meditate. And every 5 minutes, I'm looking at the watch. I've been meditating for 30 years, y'all, right? And so the awakening was that I didn't know how to be still. I knew how to meditate. I knew how to pray. But I didn't know how to just let go and be, because my definition was what I did in the world. My definition was I defined myself by being busy and all the things that I was accomplishing. And to just be still and allow myself to listen to that still small voice, which really is still and small, to be able to do that, I was like, oh no, I got to go back to the beginning. Because that place within me, that infinite wholeness and oneness that we teach about, is a place that you surrender to. It's not a place you get.
Yeah. And so please don't be mistaken then that we're saying that the only piece of that trifecta that you are supposed to live in is the spiritual, because now we've not set ourselves up for success, right? So what if it's a hybrid? What if it means that materiality will always be a part of our lives? And we don't make that wrong. We actually intend for it, we aim for it, we show incredible appreciation and gratitude for it, and we share it abundantly. And what is it? What about the fact that things happen and we get sad? What is it that works within us in that cyclical realm where our emotions come up and we become angry and we get sad and we feel all of these things? It's not that we're saying don't do that, but don't fully surrender your power to that. Let those fields of emotions work with you in order to get back to what? The spiritual inherent nature of who we are. Do you understand what I'm saying? So materiality doesn't become the end game. The surrender and the prisoner of emotion doesn't become the finality of it. But it's encased in a lifestyle of spirituality that understands that in my little velvet bag of my words, one of the key things about me is my inherent nature. And my inherent nature is what? Divine. My inherent nature is what? Solution-oriented. My inherent nature is what? All-knowing, all-powerful. You know those omni words? Omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. All of those things are a part of who we are, but they sit in wait for our recognition and our invitation of them. So it doesn't matter how many times we do what we do and how many Sundays we come and how many classes and how many years we meditate, there is still a continuance of that journey of the embodiment of our spirituality. The question is, how much do you want that? How much of your inherent nature do you want to be in relationship with? The power of the inherent you says, it's here. How much do you want to be in relationship to it? Because if you surrender wholeheartedly and run towards it, then what does that mean? It means that there are some parts of the story that I have to stop telling. It means that there are some things that I continue to give my power away to that I have to reclaim that back. There are some things that require me to grow weary and tired of the excuses and to move past that and to not give my identity to those things, right? So at some point, I have to stop blaming my mother. At some point, I know. At some point, you have to look at that particular marriage and go, it was exactly what I needed in order to create a launching pad for where I am now. So we start to look at all of those things, not from a condemning lens, but from a celebratory lens that says, that's exactly what I needed in order to prompt me to make the decisions that brought me to where I am here right now in this moment. That's living from that space of spirituality. That's honoring the entirety of the journey. There was a poem that's in the book by James Whitcomb Riley. He says, "O thou who dost all things devise and fashion for the best, help us who see with mortal eyes to overlook the rest." Because in our mortal vision, sometimes we become seduced by what didn't work. We become seduced by the tragedy of the story. We become seduced by that, and we put a period after that rather than putting a comma. And allowing life and all of those things to work for us, not against us, because you inherently are divine. And so in the book, he goes on to say, the good that is in you. Would you agree that there's good in you? Do you negotiate with that good and say, it's only good and I can only acknowledge it if I behave this way? But as Norwood said, I was born with this good inside of me. I was born this way. That's what inherent means, right? And so Christian Larson says to recognize, that's the big word, recognition, to recognize the greater good that is inherent in all things. So now we're not just talking about us. We're talking about the person to your right and to your left. They also have good in them. I know it might be questionable when you look at them right now, but that's what inherent means, right? The people around you, get this, all people, all politicians have within them what? An inherent good. He says to recognize the greater good that is inherent in all things, then is to cause that good to become a greater and greater power. So stop for a moment. When I look at the thing that I find deplorable, and I look at that thing, and I, not someone else, but I began to look through a different lens and say something like this: I demand to see the good, the inherent good within this person or within this situation. To make a demandment on what we call spiritual law simply means that by demanding that, law does what? Obeys. By making a demandment on spiritual law, that's cause and effect, when I demand to see the inherent good in any situation or in any person, then he says the greater and greater power of that must be revealed. And he goes on to say that good to become a greater power in you until the demandment, until it becomes just as strong in action as it previously was in realization. And that's what heaven is. That's what heaven is. So you and I live in heaven, but we experience heaven in degrees.
So you're the one you've been waiting for. By the way, some of those people out there that you're judging are judging you because they don't understand this concept. So I'm divorced now, and I'm having lunch with my girlfriend. And she's like, oh, I'm so sad. I just can't believe this relationship broke up because you were like the model. And she's going on and on. And I'm sitting there going, what is she talking about, right? And so I'm driving out of the restaurant, and there's a billboard with my ex-husband on it. I would love to tell you I stayed in a spiritual sense, but I looked up at that billboard and I screamed in my car, why are you doing this? And a voice said, because you are to see the love in him. Because you are to be grateful for the gifts that you have been given. And this wave came over me, and I'm like, oh, this isn't about him. This is about how I'm supposed to live. This is how I'm supposed to be on the planet. And I'm supposed to understand that everything that looks like a challenge, every appearance, every event is an opportunity for me to stand in the awareness that, God is present. Love is present. Grace is present. And who am I to judge that when I don't like being judged? When I don't like people having opinions about me or excluding me? And by the way, y'all decided to be on the planet at this time. You're here by a divine appointment, and your job is conscious contact. Your job is to step into an awareness that you are so powerful, so grand, so extraordinary that you model and exhibit God on every level. Otherwise, thank you so much. I was looking at Norwood, and he expresses through that music. But he's not an exception. He's an example of using the light within you everywhere that you are to bring your gifts and to see it in others. And by the way, the interesting stuff that's happening on the planet, hooray, because it's a wake-up call. By the way, it's a call to prayer. It's a call to see beyond the appearances and beyond the stuff and to go to that inherent nature that is present in all, through all, and as all. You're in the quantum field where infinite possibilities live. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. So how are you in relationship to the seduction of emotion that wants to tell you to be depressed? How are you with the seductive pull of the emotion that tells you you should be living in fear? How are you with those things? Do you completely surrender to it, or do you go, this is my opportunity? This is the thing that I have been born for. This is the ability for me to access my inherent nature. Last Sunday I shared with you my realization around worry. That worry is not a bad thing. Worry is a signal. Worry is a signal that when I worry, it simply means that I'm reflecting upon missing something that I once had. So if I worry about money, again, it's because at one point in my life I had sufficiency. So rather than linger in the worry, what is my choice? To pivot over to the time when, in my inherent nature, there was sufficiency. If I worry about the well-being of my family or my children, there must have been at some point a time when there was peace and harmony there. So worry then becomes a signal that instead of focusing on the potentiality of harm, I focus back on what it felt like to have peace and harmony in these relationships. That's accessing my inherent nature. That is a tool. Everybody's going and asking, how do I do this? It sounds great, but how do I do this? That's how you do it. The bigger question is, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to do it when you are paralyzed with fear and worry to go, wait a minute, my inherent nature tells me that if I pivot over to the polarity of what it is that I'm worried about, I usher in that recognition. I make a demandment on the law, and the law reciprocates. And so what happens? That by using the tool of my inherent nature, I change the course of my reality. If I don't disrupt it, what happens? Self-fulfilling prophecy. Everything that I worry about then becomes true. And that's neither a good nor bad thing. That's yours and ours relationship with law, or here's our big word, choice. Choice. Ever heard that word? Choice? That's another word in your velvet bag, your little spiritual velvet bag that you take around with. Now, this is a tricky word, I think, in today's environment. Would you say?
I would say that's true.
Yeah, because, wow, should we go? Let's go there. So.
I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Do I have a choice? Okay. What happens when, culturally, let's say that you are a part of a cultural consciousness. Culturally, it appears as though that choice has been taken away from you. I would assume that you don't. I don't go up to that culture consciousness and say, well, you have a choice. Because that's spiritual malpractice. That's taking a truth principle, but throwing it and shoving it down someone's throat who doesn't understand spiritual principle. Do you see the difference in that? That's watching someone drowned in their cultural consciousness and then standing on the edge of watching them drown going, I'm going to treat for you right now. Rather than finding a stick or a buoy or something and getting them out from the experience of drowning. Once I get them out from, if they're wanting to get out of the experience of drowning, then comes a re-education or an unlearning about that cultural consciousness. And what is introduced is the inherent power and good within all of us. But do you realize to try to tell people that without lifting them out of the drowning is, again, spiritual malpractice. And you understand why people struggle with these particular philosophies, because they don't have the bandwidth yet to be able, or the tools in their little bags, to be able to comprehend that. So I, personally, would never go up to a marginalized race or sex and tell them, well, you're at choice. Because that doesn't help the situation. And so that's happened this week in our entertainment field, where a particular artist said, well, we've always been at choice as a race.
I prayed.
To which we would say, and just so you know, what we're talking about, Kanye West saying that slavery was a choice. Okay. So, oppression, let's back up. Oppression is a choice. But when you've known nothing other than oppression, you can't have that conversation.
Because you don't know anything else.
Because you don't know anything else. And so, what then is the responsibility of those who have awakened a little bit or a lot to do? What is the responsibility of those of us in this room who have awakened a little bit or a lot, whether African American, whether white, no matter what race, religion, sex that we are? What is the responsibility, the utmost responsibility to do? To live it. To live it by example. And then in the living of it, when there is the question of, Cynthia, how did you do that? then we have the entryway or the portal to begin to have those discussions about conscious choice.
Right. So in quantum physics, they say that everything is a wave or a particle until you observe it. And I say that everything is a wave or a particle until you observe it and you name it. And so what they are talking about is high noticing or witnessing. And so in any given moment, you get to step back as the observer, as the high noticer, and witness what is happening and then choose. How do I want to respond? How do I want to react? What do I want to say? How do I want to step forward? And I'll tell you, being an African American woman has been interesting when I was coming up, because there was so many opinions about what that meant and how we were to be treated and how we were to show up, and because of the abuse and everything that went on in my childhood, I bought into that. And then one day it was like, well, what if that's not true? What if I get to bring the best of myself to the planet in any given moment, and there's nothing that can stop me, nothing that can get in the way but me? What if I can just notice that I can go into that environment which is toxic, or I can go into that environment which is enlivening? And when I got that, it was like, well then, if I'm in a space that feels toxic, what's the lesson? What's my opportunity? And what's my choice? And I want you to know that sometimes the choice is set a boundary. Sometimes the choice is, I choose not to be here. But last night, David and I were having this amazing conversation, and he said to me, there's a lot of ways to look at this. And I was like, wow, yeah, because I was in black or white. It's going to be this or it's going to be that, right? But the choice, the choice for me to step into a space where I notice what's happening and decide how I want to engage, or if I want to engage. What I want you to know is that you come here for the feeding. You come here to be supported and to take in the incredible principles that are offered here. But when you walk out that door, what do you choose? Are you going to be engaged in the gossip? Are you going to be engaged in the condemnation? Are you going to be engaged in the exclusion? Or are you going to stand as a space of light and love and the presence of your inherent nature that says you have everything that you need?
So the true order of things is really about choice. Mm-hmm. So this side of the room is going to play the role of the toxic world. Just playing the role.
They're so happy about that.
I know. So you pick a section that's the enlightened. Everybody smile if you want. Okay. So in the toxic world, my choice is what? If I'm here, what's my choice? I can react. Okay, so I can react and I can surrender to that, and I can be caught up in the what? In the toxicity. I can be caught up in the narrative. I can be caught up in the rallying against and all of that kind of stuff. What's another choice? Another choice is to withdraw and not even be there, right? What's another choice? Fight it. I can be in the locale of it, but I can set a boundary. What's my other choice? Do nothing? Huh? Go to the other side of the room. Go to Cancun. Here's where I'm at. My space right now in evolution is I don't want to avoid this. What I would rather do is ask the bigger question, what is mine to do? If it feels intuitively that it's mine to do to be in this arena, then how do I be in this arena? I be in this arena by reconnecting to the inherent you that says, even if you disagree or rally against me, I don't take it personally, but I can stand as a witness for that which is the inherent nature of me. Correct?
That's enlightenment.
It can be crazy too.
Yeah. Yes.
But most of those who are called enlightened are also labeled as crazy or
Right.
passive.
Right. And have learned what you're talking about, though. They didn't just leap from here to enlightenment.
Right.
They walked through the human experience to that space of knowing.
And so in this energy might be something similar to my mother, and that will trigger me. And in the triggering of that, rather than now considering it a trigger, what if it's a signal? Just like worry is a signal, what if this is a signal for me individually to do what? For you to do what? When you are signaled. To look at it differently and go, what needs to be healed in the memory of this? Because otherwise, if I don't heal it, it just continues to circle back around. I just continue to create those environments. But if I notice it, I love that term, high noticing. That's awesome. So in my high noticing, I realize it actually has nothing to do with this. It's the signal of the inherent you saying, do you still want to carry the residue of this around with you? Or would you like to heal it so that you can spiral up to your next great expression? Because if I don't, then I do what in the spiraling up? I just stay in the same groove. And that becomes my story. And I'm very committed to the story of how awful it was. But if I'm truly, 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 truly in relationship with my inherent nature, I'm not going to avoid that.
Right.
And I'm not going to judge that. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to heal.
Right. Because if you run, it will chase you. Is there anyone in here who has patterns that have happened more than once? Here's the thing. Your inherent nature is divine and it's spiritual. But you are called to practice. And I know you've heard this a lot, but you're called to practice. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, in every aspect of your life, your body and your body of affairs, you're called to practice. You don't get a day off from God. You don't get a day off from you because you're the one you've been waiting for. And when you really understand that the practice, nobody becomes a great athlete without practice. No one becomes a great singer without practice. No one becomes great at anything without practice. And so I want you to know coming here on Sunday is not enough. Taking a class every 6 months is not enough. You have to, before you get out of bed, you have to tap into that divinity. Your spiritual practice is a non-negotiable. Your seeing the God in you and seeing the God in others is a non-negotiable. You don't get to have a reason or give yourself a reason to be unkind, to be malicious, to be non-supportive. That has to come off the table. It can come into the room like he just said, but you get to say, I'm here with you and I get these feelings and I get this experience, but I'm choosing something else because I want to be a beneficial presence for this planet, for my life, the life of my children, the life of people in my neighborhood, my spiritual community. I'm choosing to be a beneficial presence, and so that old behavior has to get thee behind me.
And there's a difference between avoiding and discerning. So whatever the wound is, and everybody's got them, What happens if I keep avoiding the trigger of the wound? The trigger just continues. And it gets very creative. Why? Why? Why does the trigger continue? Because the inherent you says, why are you allowing the wound to perpetuate inside of you? The inherent you says, this is not the reality of who and what you are, and so we're going to help facilitate the healing of that wound. So then that means that the trigger keeps showing up, not in order to test and taunt and to make your life miserable, but to promote healing. And if I avoid that, what happens? It just continues. But if I go to the trigger and I transmute the trigger into a signal, and I say, thank you. And so I can stand in the experience that's uncomfortable and not make it other people's responsibility, but I can stand in the experience and I can go, I'm ready. I'm ready to have this healed. I've told you before, in Mobile, when I was in Mobile, Alabama, I got invited to speak at a Baptist university for a comparative religion class. And I thought, well, how cool is that? And then went and stood in that arena auditorium, and one person began to yell heretic, which then ignited like a brush fire. And I stood at the base of that massive classroom with a mob mentality screaming heretic at me. And I just stood there because I wanted to feel the feeling. I wanted to feel the feeling of not being liked. I wanted to feel the feeling of being judged. I wanted to feel the feeling of not being popular, of not being seen, not being heard, not being valued. I wanted to feel those feelings that were the same replicated feelings from my childhood. I wanted to feel them and not run away from them. And in the standing there as they're screaming and yelling heresy at me, and they don't want my trifolds in my business cards, as I'm feeling that experience, a tremendous healing occurred because I realized that they were operating only from what they knew. And at some time in my life, I would have been up there probably joining them. And so I went back to my car shaking, but also laughing, because I realized, wow, that was amazing. To be the Daniel in the lion's den and to then take dominion back from the lion. Because I wasn't harmed in any way. And my choice was to just stand there and to listen and to allow without taking it on. And I must say, soberly, it's been one of the few moments in my life that I've had that level of success. And I want more of that, careful. I want to be in high noticing when it's not about me, but when it's an opportunity to heal a wound. And that's the true order of things. And that's the perfection of the universe, that it keeps bringing us those opportunities.
Yeah, and I want to tell you all that the dissolution of that marriage had me step back and say, you know how the universe goes, hey, maybe you should pay attention to this, and then it taps you on the shoulder, then it kind of slaps you upside the head, right? And that marriage was the slap upside the head, because I had been with the same person in a different body many times, common denominator. And so what David's talking about, the healing of the wound, was that I had to heal my relationship with the divine first, because even though I'm doing all this spiritual work, there was a part that still was in that old modality. And the other part was that I had to heal my relationship with the masculine. So today, I've been with the same person for 23 years, and we'll be married 19 in August. I know that is a transformation of my consciousness. I know that my willingness to look at how I contributed to those interesting relationships is what could make me available to have that kind of love in my life, to have that kind of honor in my life. You know, my husband from the very first moment saw me. He recognized who I was, and he has never wavered since. And I know it's because in that decision for me to take responsibility for my own actions and the way I was performing in relationships, I had to decide to choose to act differently, see differently, respond differently. And that those old wounds and that old experience didn't have to define me going forward one more minute. And that's the truth for you. You know, I don't think you can be on the planet and not have had some stuff, right? You know, those of us who are baby boomers, we came into families that were a little crazy. They came from the war and the depression and all kinds of stuff, and they were hoarding and acting crazy. And so, right? And so we had to find a way to survive. But survival's not the thing. Surrender's the deal. Surrender to your inherent nature, to your divinity, to your power, to your grace. I mean, imagine if everybody in this room walked out with another way of thinking, another way of being, tapped into their inherent nature. Any idea how many people we would touch? That would be a shift. Not just for Atlanta, but for the planet, right?
And so, yeah. So that's what this month is about, the exploration of our inherent nature. And what are we going to do about that? You're with us next week, too, for Mother's Day.
I am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.